All right. Welcome back. Did everybody enjoy their lunch? It's very good, wasn't it? Um, Welcome to this afternoon's continuation of the discussion of the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm going to do just an abbreviated version of what I did this morning because there are some new faces. So I'm going to thank once again Fred and Charlotte Hubble for their support for this event and for all of our environmental programming and all the work we're able to do through the Hubble Environmental Law Initiative. And our partners for this afternoon, the IEC and the Labor Center. I will introduce our first panel in a moment. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here today to talk about the most significant climate legislation passed in our history about 18 months ago. The incentives in this legislation are designed to transition us to a clean energy economy, but they are much more than that, right? And today's panels are going to focus on some of the elements of the IRA or IRA that really are a matter of industrial policy, right? That target issues of environmental justice and labor. A lot of the bonus credits under the tax provisions, for example, give bonuses to projects that are located in economically distressed communities, traditional energy communities, and tribal lands. Bonus credits are available for projects that pay the prevailing wage and hire qualified registered apprentices. That's our second panel this afternoon. And several provisions offer bonus credits for projects that meet certain domestic content requirements. So these really are issues of industrial policy. So we are fortunate to be able to dig into those issues this afternoon. And it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our first panel, who will then introduce the other panelists. We do have one panelist who couldn't be here live, so we're going to try to do the hybrid thing, which I'm sure will just go smoothly without a hitch. Haha, right. So we will deal with that. She's the second presenter, I think, when we get there. But so let me, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Geyer, the moderator, Energy Policy Council at Iowa Environmental Council. Years of experience. I mean, I can talk to Steve for hours about energy policy. And I mean, he's an encyclopedia on the topic, especially when it comes to Iowa. Since 2008, Steve has owned and led GWA International, a solar installation company based in Altoona that has designed and installed solar systems on the federal courthouse in Cedar Rapids, Iowa DNR facilities, and homes and businesses. He is a graduate of Iowa Law and has a BA in physics from the University of Northern Iowa. And you can read more about him in the program. So without further ado, I will turn that over. Oh, questions. I knew I was forgetting something. So if you weren't with us this morning, you have these little cards for questions, and we will come around. Blake has told me she will look for people with questions during the presentation. So if you have a question, write it down. We'll periodically pick them up and I'll kind of filter them and pose certain questions. We can't get to all of them, but pose some of the questions to the panel at the end. All right.
Thanks, Shannon. So yes, indeed, I'm Steve Geyer, Energy Policy Council. So we're going to talk about Inflation Reduction Act in Iowa implementing the clean energy climate provisions. And Kristen sort of laid an overview of items that are available. We'll take a look at individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and sort of what I view as some of the key provisions. There is no way we have time to deal with everything in this act. It's massive. But we will highlight what we believe are important items. We'll discuss a little more detail behind some of the items that Kristen mentioned, and move away, I'll just say, from the high level to a little more detail based on guidance that's out there and sort of what we see coming down the pike. So once again, there I am. So IEC, if you don't know about the Environmental Council, we are the largest basically organization in the state focused on environmental issues. Our work focuses on energy and water, and more importantly, related to climate change, and then also the environmental justice issues that are associated with that. Primarily working at state, but we also focus on federal issues also. Again, trying to look towards an Iowa where we have a just, healthy environment and a sustainable future for all Iowans. I'm going to touch on the topics we'll cover and the agenda, and I'll use this opportunity to also then introduce who will be speaking and what the topics they'll have. More, as Shannon has noted, you can find in the program to find out more about the individuals. So I'm going to talk about the tax credits, the rebates, the deductions, the grants that are available. Again, not everything, but items that we view very important in this act. Amber Buckingham will be online. She was not able to make it today. She'll address two of the rebate programs that the Iowa Economic Development Authority is seeking funding for. She can bring us up to date on terms of where they're at on that. And then she has a couple of other items dealing with what Iowa is going to seek funding that she'll address. Then I'm also pleased to have Jeremy Karen here, who will take one step further and sort of show us, well, how can a city actually benefit from this? And as Kristen mentioned, there's an important aspect to the IRA, which is governments and nonprofits can actually apply for and receive funding as a part of any project they have that meets the underlying, again, tax credit requirements. And then we'll have Cody Smith, my colleague, who will address items that I think maybe people are, now Kristen mentioned briefly some of them, but he'll provide a little example of how that's actually working in Iowa and the programs that IEC will actually be helping on. So I'm going to start out by, some of you maybe have seen this before, but IEC put together an energy infrastructure funding hub. It is a website that I would encourage you to take a look at. It has not only, what we deem as being the important elements out of this act that most Iowans basically can avail themselves of, but it will also have helpful information. One of the things that you'll notice in my presentation, I find the code to be extremely cumbersome to try and actually interpret what they really mean. So I've tried to, for instance, develop spreadsheets that will help you understand the way that the flow of the program actually intended to work. It'll give you, whether it's limitations, it'll give you sort of a way to march yourself through this and again, understand, am I even available? Now, Kristen has talked about the Rewiring America. The thing that it does do, because you can enter that information, it'll kick back to you, but it doesn't step you through necessarily how they derive that. So the flowcharts help you sort of understand how it's derived. And as soon as we get, there we go. So again, I divided things. First, we'll start with individuals, and then we'll move to businesses, nonprofits, governments. So individuals, again, you saw some of this in Kristen's slide. I won't talk too much about the 25D. It is a carryover from the previous tax credit that was available. It reestablished and put it back up at 30%. It's going to go through 2032. The thing that is not basically necessarily a given is the phase outs that occur in supposedly 2033, 2034. Again, a little detail that you have to basically pay attention to. That only occurs if by 2032, utility greenhouse gas emissions have declined 75% from 2022. If they don't, then the program actually continues. 25C, I'm going to address that. Again, there'll be a flow chart to help understand that. I'm not going to address the two rebate programs. Amber will help us understand those. And then the EV credits, basically both the new and the used. Again, I'll provide a little more detail than Kristen provided to sort of step you through that. So 25C, these are the energy efficiency and energy property tax credits. And so let's divide that into 3 separate items. And as a summation of all of these, the great thing about this program, it's basically every single year. And so you can take advantage of this tax credit up to that limit. And there's 2 different things to look at in terms of the limit. The normal limit is $1,200 tax credit per year. And if you basically are looking at, for instance, a heat pump, then that actually has a separate one of $2,000. So theoretically, if you were doing a heat pump, you could be qualifying for a $3,200 tax credit for that particular tax year. Going back to the dividing, so the energy audit. So you're entitled to a $150 tax credit if you have that audit performed in that year. By the way, a lot of these programs will likely require an audit. So it's giving you a credit for an audit that's going to be required. Then let's move to the energy efficiency credit. And so your typical items, so your insulation, your ceiling, and by the way, your exterior windows are by code in there up to $600, and exterior doors. So again, up to $250 per door, $500 total. When you sort of, in your head, sort of go through, well, how is this going to work? I think that's a challenge. You know, am I going to only replace 1 window per year? I don't know. But that's sort of the challenge here. And then energy property. And so you have 2 different categories. So the one is your traditional. And by the way, this is 30% times the cost of these items. And you'll notice on the basically items where the labor either is included or is not included. So on the energy efficiency, the insulation, et cetera, you can't include the actual labor cost in that. However, on energy property, you can include the labor cost when you're taking your 30%. But as you can probably notice, most of these items are going to cost quite a bit more than your allowable credit. So $600 for your basic energy property, and again, $2,000 if you're in the heat pump category. So you've got the heat pump water heater, and then the biomass stove. I won't claim to know a lot about where that's intended to apply, but it's available. So let's move on to, if I can. There we go. So let's look at the new electric vehicle tax credit. So again, a little more detail in terms of what this really means. And so what they decided in the legislation to do was focus on basically the minerals that go into the battery and then the components of the battery. And so each of those then qualifies individually if it meets the requirements of, US, North American made, for $3,750. The only way you end up with $7,500 is you have to meet both of those, and then that adds to the $7,500. So for ease, since 2024 came along, and there really were not that many vehicles that actually met the requirement. By the way, I should point out these are income qualified, meaning in this case, income qualification means the maximum amount you can actually earn. And so it's a household income, it's adjusted gross income. And so for married filing joint, it's $300,000, it's $225,000 for head of household. And I believe, I forget what the exact number was, maybe $150,000 for single. If you make more than that, then you're not entitled to a credit. The other limitation, MSRP. So the manufacturer's suggested retail price is a bar. And so any of these vehicles, even though they're on the list, if that MSRP is above either $55,000 in the case of cars, or vans, trucks, basically are at the, and SUVs are at the $80,000 amount. And so it depends then, can I find the vehicle that's a vehicle that meets that mineral and component, but is also below that MSRP? That's, to me, that is the challenge. And then for ease, again, then these are the ones for 2024 that only met one of those requirements. And so you'll see, again, same MSRP limitations, but, and I couldn't find where it distinguished as to the manufacturer telling which one they actually met. but they only met one of them. So let's move to used vehicles. There we go. So I'll say, I am not going to show you all of these. There's a lot of them. But at the bottom of the slide, you can go to that website, and that will actually have a list of all the vehicles that actually qualify for this. Here are limitations. This vehicle has to be $25,000 or less. So even though I'll just say the comment was made, well, there's a lot of these, sure, but they can't be more than $25,000. The deal can only occur at a dealership. So, you can't have any private sales that meet this requirement. Part of that is because it's the dealer that it ends up having to file for this, and they have to have the actual VIN number, et cetera. The vehicle has to be at least 2 years old or older. So as this moves through time, that will shift, but it still has to be at least 2 years old. It can be much older than that, but it has to be at least 2. And it basically cannot have already been transferred to a qualified buyer previously. This is a one-time thing. So you can't basically have the vehicle transferred to one taxpayer, and then it can't basically be transferred to a second taxpayer. It's a one-time deal. The vehicle weight, that becomes important later on in terms of commercial version of this. But it's 14,000 pounds or less. I mean, that's pretty much the majority, if not all, of the vehicles that were on those lists before. It does apply to more than just basically EVs. So your fuel cell vehicles, your plug-in hybrids are also in this category. They just have to have basically 7 kilowatt hours battery capacity to meet the requirement. And, I found this an interesting limitation, but primarily for use in the US. So I guess I can't move my vehicle over to Europe and take advantage of this credit. And again, you have to be from a dealer and not secondhand from private sale or basically online. Whoops, was that one to me? Nope, that was it. So let's shift to businesses, governments, and nonprofits. I probably get more questions in this area than any other area. And as Kristen pointed out, this is new. This is something that, finally, is allowing non-tax-paying entities to take advantage of these credits in a pretty novel way, where unlike, having to basically have tax liability, this will be a check directly from Treasury in respectively whatever the amount is actually going to be. So on this one, I'm just looking at the renewable energy tax credits. And so the 48 to 48E, the 45 to basically 45Y. What is that about? It really isn't that big of a deal. All they've done is 48 and 45 were already existing. It listed the technology. And so the only thing that occurs in 25 basically is it moves to what they're calling the technology neutral. So it's not going to list the technology. Frankly, it's not going to get rid of any. They'll still be there. It just has the ability to add maybe things that haven't been thought of yet and apply that tax credit to those items. And again, that same proviso I mentioned before in terms of if the power sector is not emitting 75% less, then this continues. There is no sunset listed. So, short of legislative action, that creates an interesting perpetual tax credit. Investment tax credit, again, 30%, similar to the individual aspect. The one thing I will point out, and I should mention, is at least in terms of the tax credits for both individuals and businesses as far as, let's just say, solar. The tax liabilities for these don't have to be just in 1 year. That credit can roll forward, at least as regards these renewable tax credits. There are some that will point out where it doesn't roll forward. And so you either can use it in the 1 year or you lose it. Production tax credit, that adjusts. I put in the numbers that actually show up in the code. So the code is, again, a continuation of what existed before, where it started out originally at 1.5 cents, and then it's been adjusted for inflation over time. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that it was already to 2.8 as of actually last year. And then with the inflationary pressures that we saw, I'm suspecting it actually is going to be even higher than that right now. That's a pretty good credit. That is for 10 years. And again, so for every kilowatt hour that is generated, let's just take the 2.8 cents. You're going to get basically a tax credit at 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour that you generate from any of those technologies. And then the clean vehicle. I did want to mention this because this is one of those examples where it does have a difference between then commercial or governments or businesses and the individual. In the individual case, this is an example where you're only available to use that tax credit originally. And that's a one-time thing. If you can't basically utilize it, it basically will not roll. This will roll. I'll just say sort of typical with business expenses, often you're going to have the ability to roll forward. And so if I have a $40,000 tax credit and I only had $10,000 tax liability, I can roll that 30 forward until I can actually use it. The 7,500, basically, so those same vehicles that appeared in the individual, it's the exact same vehicles then that would apply in the commercial sector for the 7,500 because it's that same criteria of under 14,000. The only thing that this adds is then all others above that are entitled to the 40,000 tax credit. The previous question in terms of school buses, yes, there was an IIJA specifically towards school buses, but my suspicion is this could also be applied to school buses because it should meet the requirement of being a commercial vehicle, a government vehicle, et cetera. The bonuses. This also is something new. It is, I'll just say it's huge if you can take advantage of any of these. So the 10% bonus for energy communities, what is that? Well, it was defined as being a brownfield or a site, basically a fossil fuel community. Fossil fuel communities, what is that? So we don't have any of the one. The one is basically if you are a coal community, meaning you had a coal mine and you're able to demonstrate that your area basically has been, I'll just say, depressed economically because of that, you would qualify as then a fossil fuel community. For Iowa, this comes in because of our coal plants that have retired since 2009. And then I'll show you where that is, by the way. Then the 10% bonus for domestic content. I'll put in a little more detail on that. It is not straightforward. It is not easy. It clearly will place an onus on the manufacturer to help us understand, which of the products actually do meet the requirement and which do not. I'm not going to talk too much about the low-income community bonus of 10% or the 20% for low-income residential, other than noting that these are competitive projects. So you're bidding into these. It's not just a given that you can get that bonus. And there's a cap. Currently, the cap is 1.8 gigawatts per year, rated in, I believe, in this case, DC, that's available. It will move forward, but that's, again, these are competitively bid. And so you may or may not be able to take advantage of that. Energy communities. So let's take a look at these. So the colors make a difference. So the way the code is structured is it's going to identify the census tract where the plant was, and then any adjoining census tract, which is the lighter colored. The purple, by the way, coincidentally, is in Illinois. And that, in fact, is an area that was identified because of the impact of a coal mine or coal mining. Somehow they fell into that. But in Iowa, you'll notice some pretty large groupings of census tract and adjoining census tracts. Sometimes they spill over into the neighboring states, but these are all plants that closed. The most recent on this grouping is up in the northeast corner. That was a Lansing plant that just closed last year. But you'll notice that, for instance, Alameda County, I'm not looking at the Wisconsin portion, the Minnesota portion, which is also there, but just the Alameda County, the only portion not covered actually is Waukon. Everything else in Alameda County is actually an energy community. I'm not really familiar with, and nor do I know what the plant was in Wisconsin that's just down the road there, north of Dubuque. Dubuque has a very small dot that actually is a plant that closed. And similarly, as so there's Davenport, which was Riverside. There's Muscatine Power on there, 2 plants in the Cedar Rapids area, and then a pretty good chunk out around Sioux City, which was basically a couple of the Neil plants. And then Omaha, Council Bluffs was actually Walter Scott. So again, that is a 10% bonus if you end up with a project in one of those areas. So going back to the investment tax credit. So if I had 30% tax credit and I'm in this area, I automatically come in at 40%. Keep going. There we go. Domestic content. It's a nice bonus if I can meet it. So I have to certify to Secretary of Treasury that basically I am meeting the steel, the iron, and the manufactured product requirements as far as being produced in the United States. On the steel and iron, that's 100%. Now, the nice thing is that's only structural components. So this mainly will apply to things like your solar system will have potentially steel racking and probably steel piles or screws, one or the other. That has to be 100%. And then the complication comes in terms of this manufactured product category they created. So I have to account for each component in each manufactured product. And then we're going to have a adjusted percentage rule. So I'm going to have to be in 2020 up to 2025, 40% is the threshold, moving up to 55% after 2026. If I am basically below those numbers, then it is not going to meet domestic content. So I'm going to explain a little bit further, give an example of this. So let's just take that solar system. And what does that really mean? So here's the components of a solar system. So I have the racking, which is steel, iron. By the way, what appears to be a case where if it's not steel or iron, then, because I could have, for instance, aluminum, but it is not actually categorized. And so apparently it meets the requirement because it's not steel and iron. The piles, the ground screws, those will always be steel. They'll have to meet it. The interesting one was the rebar. So if I have concrete foundations, that rebar actually has to be 100% basically US. The structural is important. There are lots of little things that go into these, the screws, basically all the little items. Even if they're steel, that doesn't matter. It's just structural aspects that basically are going to qualify. The tracker is going to be a manufactured product. The module is a manufactured product, and the inverter is a manufactured product. And so let's look at an example of how, I'll just say this complicated system will work in terms of determining whether or not I am meeting that threshold. So here's a really simple system. It has 2 manufactured products. One's costing $100, one is costing $200. But then the first product has 2 components. The second basically has 3 components. But then I need to know the cost of each of those components and where it was actually manufactured. And so I'm going to sum up then the US manufactured products and cost, and that's going to be my numerator. My denominator will be the sum of the 2 products, so 300. And in this case, I end up with being 60%, which means that even in a future project, I'm going to be above 55. And so all of my project is suddenly being deemed to meet the domestic content bonus, or in other words, the 10%. So let's take that one step further. So now I basically have that project, let's just say in Alameda County. It is in the energy community. So I have the 30%. I'm going to add the 10% for the community, and now I'm going to add 10% for domestic content. So I got 50%. And now we're going to start talking about, so it says direct pay. The code actually is basically elective pay. And elective pay has 2 different versions. For tax-paying entities, it is the ability to transfer that credit or sell the credit to another tax-paying entity that can utilize it. You're going to get a discounted value on that, but it is going to be an ability of them, the taxpayer, to, I'll just say, make it more economic for them. The direct pay for governments, nonprofits, clearly the one that I'll just say gets the most interest, trying to figure out when's it available, how do you go about it? Maybe Jeremy can enlighten us in terms of how this actually works. But this is everything. So any tax credit available is going to be available then to these tax exempt entities, whether it's the ITC, the PTC, the bonuses, the energy, all that is all going to sum up just like you were a tax-paying entity, but now I'm going to apply to a treasury for that same amount. There's some, I'll just say, some processes in place where you go to a website, you register your project, and then that registration will provide you with an identification number. That number then is what used to go to Treasury that basically verifies, yes, you qualify for this amount, and then the check is issued from Treasury. Now, here's the little caveat as far as the direct pay. And something I'll say that originally got overlooked, but is rather important. So if the project is less than 1 megawatt, and again, this is just looking at the tax exempt and the direct pay provision. If it's less than 1 megawatt, you're going to qualify for 100%. But it also then has this proviso, I'll just say, where it's a phase out. And so if basically 90% in this year is not, then basically I get 90% this year if I don't meet that. In 2025, I get 85%. And in 2025, I get 0 if I can't actually meet domestic content. There are 2 exceptions. We'll see if this comes into play. The one is if you can demonstrate that it increases costs more than 25%. And the other is, I'll just say, maybe the more unlikely, which is you can show there's not sufficient quantity. You can show that the quality is not as good. We'll see how this plays out. So a couple more items in terms of, again, businesses, governments, and nonprofits. This was, I'll just say, somewhat talked about with Kristen. A little more detail here in terms of what this deduction actually is. This is just, again, an extension and I'll just say, enhancement of the 179D deduction, which has been available and now is just enhanced. So your commercial building. So I'm going to basically model and compare against the ASHRAE 90.1 standard. If I can show a 25% reduction, I get 50 cents per square foot. If I can show up to 50, I can get $1 per square foot. Then also, now let's bring in the labor requirements. So both the labor requirement of prevailing wage, apprenticeship. So if those are met, and I'll just say many provisions of the IRA, they decided that the multiple of 5 appeared to be the way to multiply everything. This is one of those cases where everything is times 5. So that same basically project now qualifies for $2.50 at 25% or $5 at basically 50%. This is key again. So they were thinking through the aspects of, well, gosh, if I'm not a tax-paying entity, I'm a government entity and I want to do this. Well, they provided a mechanism. So for any, whether it's the engineer, the architect, the contractor, they are allowed, or basically the entity, the government entity, can actually then transfer that basically to, again, those entities. So it should allow for, I'll just say, a more cost-effective project, because any of those entities can now basically build that into their overall cost. I think that's actually key. It should work pretty well. And more importantly, they can do this every 3 years. So maybe the disincentive to go for 50% is because if I can do 25% and then just 3 years later do another 25, we'll see how this plays out also. And then one more. So builders and contractors. So this is single family and manufactured homes. And so there are tax credits available for up to $2,500 for the Energy Star, $5,000 basically for the DOE Zero Energy. But here's, I think, where the more important one comes in. It's the multifamily housing, where if I basically have multiple units, I can get $500 per unit. It's Energy Star, $1,000 per unit. It was Ready Home compliant. Then, of course, like I say, let's multiply it by 5. So if I basically meet basically the prevailing wage requirements, now I can multiply by 5. I can have $2,500 per unit or $5,000 per unit. That looks like a pretty significant deduction to me, or to the credit basically to the builder. And then there's one thing that actually works on this too, which is if this happens to be a residential complex that is 4 stories or taller, they can not only avail themselves of this, but they can also stack with the 179D. So if you're looking at multifamily above 4 stories, that's a significant potential credit / deduction, again, which should bring down hopefully the cost of housing. I should mention stackability. Many of these programs are stackable, some are not. And Amber may address this, but the 2 rebate programs, you can't use both rebates on the same item. Now, on the other hand, you can use tax credits and rebates together. And so if I got, let's just take the heat pump. I have an $8,000 rebate. I'm going to take that off my costs first, and then I can come in and take my 30% tax credit on the remainder back on the 25C tax credit, which would be, again, up to $1,000. And I think, yes, indeed. So my conclusion, the IRA is going to accelerate electrification. This is somewhat, I think, what Kristen was mentioning, but it clearly is going to help move this along. It is clearly in Iowa going to see an acceleration of wind, solar storage, and transmission. And we're in a paradigm shift. Everything about our system is changing, including not only the way we generate, the way we deliver, but ultimately how we basically regulate will change also. And with that, yes, you go ahead. I don't know how to do that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, this is the smooth transition.
Yes.
Let's see. Maybe you can just find it. We go here, or do you want me to see?
And so as we work through this, we are going to welcome Amber
Trying to find
Buckingham. Trying to find, yes.
Is Tyler in? Yes. So I think this is it. No. I can stop sharing and see if. Don't. No, because this is Chrome. This is the. Sorry, how do we get out of it? There. Okay. Now what? Is this back here? Yeah. Aunt. Amber, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. So
All right.
how would you like to do this? We have your slides, or would you like to share them yourself so you could advance them, or do you want us to?
Either
click
way,
them?
whatever works best for you. I know that they were kind of in a master slide deck, so if it's easier for you to advance them on your end to make it through to the next.
It's not one way or the other, really. So you can you should be able to share now. Do you want to do that so you have control?
Yeah, I suggest having her share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then we'll go to big screen. All right, would you
Can
like?
you guys see my screen?
Yes,
All right.
I think we're good to go. Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody have a question card filled out yet so far? Okay.
Great. Thanks, Amber.
All right, we'll see. Okay, there we go. I think we're in presentation mode, just checking. I think you guys can still see my screen based on what I'm seeing in the room. So I apologize for not being able to be there in person, but I am under the weather and did not want to share my germs with any of you. My name is Amber Buckingham, and I am a program manager here in the Iowa Energy Office, which is a division of the Iowa Economic Development Authority. And today I'll be talking to you about the IEDA, Iowa Energy Office federal funding opportunities. So first, briefly, I'll discuss the home energy rebate programs. I will touch on the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund, the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant, and Solar for All. So first up are the home energy rebate programs. The Inflation Reduction Act authorized DOE to carry out 2 energy rebate programs, 50121, which is now called HERE, which is the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program, and 50122, HER is now the acronym, which is the Home Efficiency Rebate Program. You may also hear them referred to as HERA and HOMES. A lot of people, including DOE, use those acronyms interchangeably, and they're constantly changing. So we're just trying to keep up as best we can. In this chart below, you can see the rebate amounts that are allowed within each rebate program. The Home Efficiency Rebate Program is more of a whole home energy efficiency program, and it's not prescriptive like the home electrification and appliance rebate. So the rebates are a little bit different and composed a little bit differently. And then in addition to those 2 rebate programs, Section 50123 of the IRA established the Training for Residential Energy Contractors program. And I know in the keynote session, there were some questions about training and education for contractors. And so I'll touch on that during that slide. So first up are the home electrification and appliance rebates. This is a rebate program to support low to moderate income households who elect to electrify their homes. Iowa will receive about $60 million. One thing I want to touch on there is, while that does seem like a lot of money, especially when paired with the sister program HER, so $121 million, it sounds like a lot, but we were at a conference recently and they mentioned that even at that, only 8% of eligible constituents and consumers will be able to participate in the rebate programs. So it seems like a lot of money, but the reach is actually probably going to be a lot smaller than we anticipate. So just something to keep in mind. These rebates could cover up to 100% of the project costs for low-income households and 50% of project costs for moderate-income households. Multifamily units do qualify if at least 50% of residents are low to moderate income. And an audit is required for heat pump installations. That cost will likely be covered by the rebate program itself. So it should be no cost out of pocket to the applicant. This audit is more of a light touch audit. Will probably require a little bit more than what the DOE considers a light touch, but certainly not as in-depth with blower doors and modeling as the sister program. And an HVAC certification is also required for heat pump installations. Right now, the most common HVAC certifications are NATE, which is the North American Technical Excellence certification, and HVAC Excellence. Both of those require a lot of prerequisites and training, and I'll touch on what Iowa elected to do when we discuss the training for residential energy contractors. The second sister program is the Home Efficiency Rebate. As I mentioned, this is a whole home energy efficiency rebate program, and the rebate amount will be determined by the total projected or measured savings. It's not based on the installation of individual end-use applications. And like with HERE, Iowa will receive about $60 million. This is where a more in-depth audit is required. And those audits are required to be completed by a BPI or ResNet certified auditor. And you have the option with her to utilize measured savings, modeled savings, or DOE has given us the option to allow for both. We're still in the planning phases of both of these programs, but we are leaning a little bit more towards the modeled side of things at this point, just to ensure that we get money in the hands of the applicants as quickly as we can. So our next steps on these two programs, guidance was provided to state energy offices in July of 2023. And we anticipate submitting our application to DOE for these funds in late April or early May of this year. Once we submit that application, we have to do a state implementation plan and a market transformation plan. That market transformation plan is due 1 year after the submission of our state implementation plan. And the state implementation plan is due 60 days prior to the launch of the rebate program. Our hope is to submit that state implementation plan in September or October of 2024 so that we can get the program launched before the end of this calendar year. But depending on things and how things move with DOE, that may be delayed into January 2025 for a launch. DOE is providing a rebate repository, but states have to provide application and audit platforms, eligibility verification systems, and all of the other necessary tools and APIs to make this program work. The State Energy Office does plan to release an RFP for implementation and planning of this program. We are a small energy office. There's only 8 of us. And so we will be releasing that RFP and looking for an implementation contractor to kind of implement soup to nuts from the planning to the implementation, call centers, income verification, everything that is necessary to make this program run. So the third piece of the puzzle, and one of the most necessary components of making sure that the 2 rebate programs run, is training our residential energy contractors. So DOE provided funding for contractor and auditor training, which aims to provide state energy offices with grants to deliver energy efficiency and electrification improvements. Iowa will receive about $2.1 million, and that comes in 2 tranches of $1 million each. Our application for this program was submitted in late January 2024, and the funds can be used for new workforce training, existing workforce training and certifications, auditor training and certifications. And to note here on the existing workforce training and certifications, Iowa plans to request an approval of our own training system and certification, knowing that the prerequisites for both NATE and HVAC excellence are long and time consuming, and we need to get contractors trained and ready to participate in these programs as quickly as possible. And a lot of that will have to do with education and some market transformation around the installation of heat pumps. We plan to probably have some hands-on learning for both consumers and contractors to make sure that everyone can see and feel and understand what a heat pump looks like, how it works, to hopefully kind of move the needle and ensure that people understand that they are a viable option in Iowa. So the timeline for the training for residential energy contractors, or TREC, like I said, we did submit that application in January 2024. We plan to, there's about a 60-day negotiation period with DOE. We're hoping to have those funds in our office in April or May of 2024 and complete our first auditor training program in June of 2024 and our first contractor training program in July and August of 2024. But before we can do any of that, we do need to have portals for both the auditor and the contractor side of things so that people that are participating in the programs can get to know what that will look like. We will do all of the training in one session to train them on how to use those portals as well as get their certifications. Next, I will move on to the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. This fund enables states to provide loans and grants to conduct commercial energy efficiency upgrades and retrofits of building infrastructure. A qualifying audit must be conducted prior to initiating a retrofit project. And the Iowa Energy Office is the authorized representative of these funds. IEDA will be allocated about $6.7 million to develop or supplement existing loan programs. And an application for this funding was submitted to DOE on May 26th of 2023. We have been told that we will probably likely not receive funding until later this year for this program. But some program highlights: it does have a 5-year lifespan. The loan term has to be less than 15 years. States may retain the funds after they're cycled through, and when that happens, the federal requirements do expire. And states can select their preferred interest rate. All right, moving on to the Iowa EECBG Community Fund. This is about $1.2 million, and it funds local government-led energy efficiency projects. To note, cities and county governments that are not eligible for direct federal allocations can apply for this. So if your city or county received a direct federal allocation, you cannot apply for this. The funds can be used for building energy assessments or audits, plus those energy efficiency upgrades found during those assessments, energy efficiency upgrades at wastewater or water supply facilities, and the replacements of things like stoplights and streetlights with high efficiency bulbs. Cost share is not required, but it is scored, and the request must be no less than $50,000 and no more than $300,000. And then on the flip side of this program, there's an innovation fund, and this funds innovative energy efficiency demonstrations and renewable energy demonstrations. The projects must benefit the community, and a scoring preference will be placed on benefits to priority communities. Project timeline is less than 3 years, and there is a minimum cost share of 50% of the total eligible project cost, and the request must be no less than $50,000. If you are interested in this program, the application does close, I believe, on March 18th of this year. And so we'll be making awards most likely in the May-June timeframe. All right, and the final application that we have submitted is for Solar for All, which is part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. There is about $7 billion available nationally. Funds must flow to low-income and disadvantaged communities, which are priority subscribers. Each priority subscriber must receive at least 20% electric bill savings, and at least 50% of the array must deliver benefits to priority subscribers, and up to 20% of the funds will be available to improve priority subscriber home energy efficiency. IEDA specifically, our proposal supports $75 million targeted towards solar arrays, energy efficiency upgrades, energy storage and resiliency, and workforce development. And an announcement of the award selection is expected in mid to late 2024. And that is all I have at this point.
Thank you, Amber. Okay, now we have to go back to share screen.
This,
Yeah, so we need to share our screen.
you should do it.
Right, Dina? Mhm. We should, we need this to be hot, bigger. Mhm.
First of all, we can kind of go. Next one.
Here. How do you want this to be bigger? I want to present right here. I'm trying to make it bigger. No. I'm gonna start from the
There we go.
beginning.
We're just gonna-
I think.
Yeah,
There we go.
this is my workaround. So
That's working.
here we go clicking. Mhm.
All right, while waiting,
So you
so
can speed read.
Jeremy
Those of you
Karen will be up next, City of Des Moines Sustainability. And she got caught. Okay,
that- Mhm. I'm getting there.
getting there.
Hybrids or not. Yeah, it won't let me click any faster. Patience.
There you go.
Yeah.
There we go.
We made it.
Perfect.
There we go.
All right. In the interest of keeping us on track time-wise, I'm just going to jump right into it. My name's Jeremy Karen. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager for the City of Des Moines. And I'm going to cover how municipal governments are starting to take advantage of the IRA and maybe touch on a couple of IJA programs that are available too that we can stack with some of the IRA funding. I'll lead with the note that a lot of our communities, this is coming at us super fast, and we're trying to build up the capacity to respond as quickly as we can, and realizing there are significant challenges there. So I wanted to set the tone first by talking about how all of these opportunities under the Inflation Reduction Act actually help advance climate action plans and other major sustainability planning efforts in our communities. And for our city, it was an opportune time. The Inflation Reduction Act was adopted like right in the middle of our climate action planning effort. We spent the last 20 months or so doing our first climate action plan. And that climate action plan is organized around the goals that you see on the screen here. And it's a climate action and adaptation plan. So looking at both emissions reduction, climate pollution reduction, and at building adaptive capacity to things that we may not be able to overcome, derechos, flooding, things like that, that we won't be able to avoid in the future. But our goals are also aligned with Paris Climate Accord goals and a lot of the goals that have been adopted internationally, looking at a 45% reduction in emissions by 2010, net zero by 2050. One of the unique goals that we have as a city is achieving 24/7 carbon-free electricity community-wide by 2035. That basically means that for every hour of every day, we need to match the energy that is either being generated or supplied to our community with clean energy resources. And if there are gaps where there's still fossil fuels, it's our job as a city to help figure out how to fill those gaps and ensure that by 2035, 100% of that energy is coming from clean resources. And we're one of the first cities to have adopted that goal. Since then, Windsor Heights and Waterloo have adopted similar goals, and there are several other communities around the country, as well as the country of Iceland, and a number of major corporations, Microsoft, Google, and Iron Mountain, and others. And so we're all part of a compact at the UN that's kind of working on figuring out how we measure, track, put in place the systems we need to meet those goals. And the IRA really helps to move us in that direction by accelerating adoption of some of these technologies. So where are we now? I just wanted to touch real quick on things that we've accomplished in our community. We have over 15 buildings that are either LEED certified or currently registered projects. You can see the breakdown there between the platinum certification, silver certification, and certified. City Council has a goal of LEED silver or greater for all new construction. So that's really been a driver of sustainability and clean energy and energy efficient technologies in our community. We've seen about a 10% reduction overall in energy use to date across our portfolio. That's primarily from our existing building stock. The 4 or 5 newer buildings that we have are actually achieving savings that are significantly greater than that and have gone through the Mid-American Energy new construction program. And then we've harnessed upwards of 400,000 in utility rebates across our existing buildings and our new construction properties too. Our emissions have seen an 18% reduction between 2010 and 2019, and we're currently catching up on our greenhouse gas inventory so that we can see where we are on tracking towards our goals. And by the end of this year, we'll likely have about 1.5 megawatts of solar online in our community at city facilities. The 2 largest arrays you see down there at the bottom of the screen, as well as that greenhouse array, are all coming online or just came online recently. And then in terms of EV chargers, that 21 number is actually, I think, maybe a little lower. I think we're up to 24 or 26 EV chargers, predominantly in our parking garages downtown. We've been looking at ways that we can take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act and other funding opportunities to expand that into disadvantaged communities, making sure that we get some charging infrastructure equity across our community out into community centers and libraries and other institutions. We did apply for charging and fueling infrastructure grant funding. Unfortunately, no communities in Iowa were awarded those funds this year. So ADAPT DSM is the city's first climate action and adaptation plan. It's been a resource for decision-making for elected leadership, for city management, and for departments. It's meant to slot right in there with all of our other major planning efforts, our comprehensive plan, our parks plan, our transportation plans, and really help to institutionalize sustainability and climate work across our organization. And it's really meant to be a tool for empowering, educating, and engaging community members. It was a very public process with a lot of workshops and focus groups and a steering committee and technical advisory group made up of experts from academia, local community-based organizations, and our utilities and other entities, and a couple rounds of public surveys. And so we really worked hard to pull in perspectives from the community, and we've identified over 107 specific actions or tactics in our plan across 7 key focus areas. And a lot of those align with funding opportunities that are in the Inflation Reduction Act. And we really tried to make sure that we reviewed what's available in the IRA to help us prioritize what we focus on in the plan. So this just gives you a quick overview of the key focus areas that are in the plan, looking at buildings and infrastructure, energy supply and distribution, as well as a host of environmental and community-specific focus areas like natural and water resources and water systems, waste management, food security, among others. This plan also really focuses on how do we harness economic benefits, health and welfare, improvement opportunities, as well as ensuring that we're delivering a more equitable and just future for our residents in our community, and really using the plan to inspire creativity and innovation in our community as well. So prioritization of a number of the actions that are in the plan are also built around fulfilling some of these other co-benefits. We realize that we can't implement every action all at once. This is a 25-year planning horizon that we were looking at. So what could we prioritize and focus on first? So we created the 35 by 35 initiative, which is 35 specific actions or tactics from the plan that we're going to focus on between now and 2035 when we need to hit that 24/7 clean energy goal. So that means a lot of the front-loaded actions are related to emissions reduction as well as energy efficiency and clean energy development and resources. A common phrase in the EE industry is efficiency first. The cheapest energy is the energy that you don't use. And so our plan really prioritizes energy efficiency first and community education, especially in the next couple of years, to get people on board, help them understand what's available for tax credits and other opportunities, and be able to take advantage of those. So I'm going to go over a few of the Inflation Reduction Act funding opportunities, ones that we are already looking at and trying to take advantage of, as well as maybe some future opportunities that are out there that we haven't spent as much time on. Amber did touch on the energy efficiency and conservation block grants. I didn't include that because the federal ones that we're getting a voucher for are actually from, I think, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So we are getting a voucher direct to our community that we're going to utilize to do some energy efficiency programming. And I'll touch on that, how we're going to leverage that in combination with the Inflation Reduction Act a little later. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund has 3 different buckets of funding. The National Clean Investment Fund, on the left-hand side of the screen there, that is a one-time grant opportunity, and we're actually part of a proposal that was submitted underneath that by Rewiring America, who we heard from earlier today and helped organize this event. I think we're the only Iowa community that's participating in that project right now, and there are several dozen communities across the United States that are participating as part of this application and teaming with these primary applicants: Rewiring America, Enterprise Community Partners, United Way, Habitat, and creating a fund that we can really take advantage of to help accelerate investment in clean energy and energy efficiency programs in our community. So we're waiting to see if that gets awarded and if we can take advantage of that. Either way, we're still going to work with these organizations. Rewiring America has been really instrumental in helping educate communities about electrification and the benefits of electrification. So we want to truly take advantage of that to educate our community members, local businesses, industry on how they can take advantage of those opportunities. Habitat for Humanity in our community, they've been building all electric homes in Des Moines for almost 10 years now. So they are a fantastic example of what's possible, especially affordable housing. And the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. We were not a part of a grant application there, but it's one that we're monitoring. If one of the awardees from that is in our region and we can take advantage of that funding, we'll certainly look at that opportunity. And then Amber touched on Solar for All. So since the state was the primary applicant for this, that's something that we can look at taking advantage of too, as a way to fund some of our investments in solar and develop potentially some programs that help our residents go solar faster. The Climate Pollution Reduction Act grant. So we are not the primary applicant here. The primary applicant for us is Polk County, and Allison Van Pelt's in the room here today and managing that effort. She's super busy, probably working on it right now. So save your questions for later. This is the one where the 3 largest MSAs in Iowa were each awarded $1 million to do a 2-phase effort, a planning grant that is a priority plan followed by a comprehensive plan. And then that was non-competitive. And so there are actually 6 counties and 80 communities, seven counties and 80 communities in the Des Moines metro that are part of this planning grant project. That's a lot of communities and counties to wrangle and get on the same page, especially on the timeline that we have for this. And so we picked a few buckets of things to focus on for the priority plan first. And then as we get into the comprehensive plan, we'll kind of zoom out and look at what those other opportunities are. And then the second phase is competitive grants. The competitive grants are upwards of $4 billion available to the communities that participated in the planning grant process. You had to be one of the eligible communities in order to apply. for that implementation grant funding. And as a community, we're looking at remaining a partner, staying a partner with Polk County and others in applying for that funding, and targeting right now a lot of programming around building capacity around energy audits and home energy efficiency improvements, and really hoping to take advantage of that to stimulate that type of work in our communities, strengthen our local workforce, and save energy customers money. So just I want to throw the timeline up there so everybody can kind of see. This is a common thing with a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act funding opportunities. There are some that are annual and will go through 2032 or beyond, but there are a lot of them that are one time, that are happening right now and are due within the next 3 months or 4 months or before the end of the year. And that's got all of us running around like crazy to figure out which ones make the most sense for us, which ones do we have time to ferret out the opportunities with, and figure out what makes the most sense to pursue. Energy efficiency contractor training, Amber touched on that. So we have some programs in our community already that can benefit from this training and from associated funding through other IRA programs. We have the DSM ION program. Currently, that is a program that we run through the city of Des Moines that provides primarily exterior improvements to low-income homeowners, and that's primarily more curb appeal or deterioration, and so fixing siding, fixing landscaping, other things that are deteriorated at a person's home. But we see a real opportunity to enhance that program to include more energy efficiency upgrades, whether that's weatherization at the household, window replacements, panel upgrades. A lot of the low-income housing in the Des Moines metro, and in Des Moines in particular, the housing stock has older electrical panels, and a lot of those homes need panel upgrades before they can even start to think about installing heat pump water heaters, solar panels, other technologies. So how can we include that in this program as well? And so the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant money, the voucher that we get, we're looking at utilizing that to take advantage of technical services from the DOE to redesign this program so that we can start to pull in these other opportunities. And then a portion of that funding dedicated to piloting that in a few of the homes, and then hopefully piggybacking that with the Climate Pollution Reduction Act grant funding to expand that program and broaden it across the community. And then we have community partners. Neighborhood Finance Corporation has the Energy Advantage program that we partnered with them on and provided some seed funding to get that going through our ARPA funding. That program provides forgivable loans, low interest loans, other financial services to low income to moderate homeowners to invest in clean energy technologies, solar primarily, and in energy efficiency upgrades. They do audits as part of that program, so making sure that they get their auditors and contractors trained up and taking advantage of the training services that IEDA is lining up. And then Invest DSM focuses more on that mixed middle housing in our community. And so we're looking to, we've already worked with Invest DSM in the past to integrate basic energy efficiency, sustainable construction concepts into their minimum requirements for projects that need to be met, but really looking at how can we improve on that, expand on that, and pass these opportunities for tax credits and for these technologies along into some of those projects in the future. Investment tax credits and elective pay. So these are a lot of the buckets that Steve touched on earlier. We just completed, as I mentioned, or are bringing online 2 solar arrays. One to serve our new animal services facility, and one to serve our new all-electric net zero greenhouse, and then also our our second municipal service center, which houses Public Works. And so we'll be taking advantage of the 30% minimum tax credit there for the projects that started came online in 2023. We're still just starting to figure out how to pursue these tax credits and what the elective pay process is. The IRS just released guidance on this not too long ago. We've all been waiting patiently for that guidance. So we're all reading through that, getting our finance offices and our other relevant departments, our legal departments on board to kind of sift through that and figure out how to navigate that so we can take advantage of it. But in a best case scenario, for particularly the greenhouse and animal services arrays, those are actually built on an unregulated landfill that's considered a brownfield. So we have that tax credit bonus adder to potentially take advantage of, as well as confirming whether we meet the domestic manufacturing requirements for the arrays that went into those projects. And they are also located in what's considered a low-income community. And then looking at applying that where we can also. But, in the best case scenario, this is just high-level math. This isn't the exact numbers for what we think we could return for those solar arrays. But if we were able to nail all of the bonus credits plus the tax credit, we'd go from having a system cost of 1.9 million to a total cost of 760,000. So significant savings on that system. And you can see on the map here where those facilities are located. We're creating kind of a campus of city facilities here. And that unregulated landfill that I talked about is actually a total of like 14 acres. And these arrays only take up a small portion of that acreage. So we're looking at how can we leverage that otherwise unusable land to build out larger solar array, community solar array of some kind, or solar plus storage, and utilizing the Inflation Reduction Act to fund that, and looking at whether that's something where we should partner with our local utility or something that we can invest in on our own behind the meter and take advantage of it that way. Still looking into that, feeling that out, seeing what makes the most sense there, but a significant opportunity to build out some clean energy for our community there. So I wanted to touch on challenges in pursuing IRA funding. And I know that there's a lot of municipal sustainability managers and other leaders here in the office too, right in the classroom today too, that I see in the room. And we're all facing this. Staff capacity is probably one of the biggest challenges we have. We're all pretty small offices. I know there's myself and one sustainability specialist on our team. And, a lot of these federal grants come with significant reporting and tracking requirements. And our offices are really going to need to be invested in and strengthened in order for us to one, wrap our heads around what these opportunities are, two, organize ourselves, and three, pursue them, write the grants, get the funds in, figure out how to turn those around and get them back out into the community or back out into our organizations, and then report back on them. That gets at the funding capacity. The timeline frequency, I think I touched on that earlier. But then also a lot of these have requirements or opportunities to partner with other community-based organizations or other communities. And so figuring out what do those teams look like, those partnerships, getting everybody with disparate ideas or approaches to the table and in agreement on the direction we want to go. That certainly presents some challenges. Shelf and shovel readiness. In a lot of communities and states that have been doing this work, sustainability work for 20 years or more, they were ready to go when the IRA hit the ground. And so they're getting a lot of the money because they're already 10 years ahead of where a lot of our communities are right now. And, you know, that creates some unfairness, I think, in the way that these funds are being rolled out to communities so fast. But we need to get up to speed and pursue these as quickly as we can. Political will is another major one. There's a lot of enabling legislation that's needed in Iowa for us to take advantage of a lot of these programs, whether that's for community solar, property assessed clean energy, pay as you save programs that provide on-bill financing potentially to fund some of these opportunities, and even integrated resource planning, for instance, giving more value to some of these opportunities in our state. And then technical assistance, making sure that we have the aptitude or can access the aptitude to understand what we need to do to get our organizations in the right place to apply for these funds. So with that, knowing the time, I'm going to turn it over to Cody here real quick.
I'm going to interject a note.
Yep.
I'm going to interject a note on the time. We're really behind time. So I apologize for that. I knew this could happen, right? There are a lot of details and it's really hard not to go over time. So if we could just try to wrap this up. We're not going to have time for questions because it's very important we start the next panel on time at 2:15. So we're going to go over a little bit with Cody's presentation. If you need to take a break, I'm sure we will all agree that's just fine, right? Because we're going to eat into our break a little bit. Maybe we can try to wrap up, you know, by 2:10 at the very latest and just start the next panel. So please feel free to take a break. You're by no means a captive audience, right? You can get up as you need to. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you. That's the risk of going last, right? I think we're all excited about this work. So I'll be as quick as I can while also giving credit to this topic, which I think is incredibly important. So I'll be talking today a little bit about the environmental justice components of the Inflation Reduction Act. Quickly, my name is Cody Smith. I'm a senior policy advocate at the Iowa Environmental Council. I like to think of this area of work of making sure that the benefits from all of the stuff, which is a lot that you've heard about today, is getting to the Iowans that have the greatest need. So we have to think strategically about communities that have the greatest need for new funding to alleviate anything from the cost of energy to the pollution that they might face and how that fits in with all the other disadvantages that exist in our state with different communities. So with that, I will go as quickly as possible. You've heard about IEC already today, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip through those. Essentially, I just want to mention one thing. We envision a state that's a leader on all of these things, the climate provisions, the clean energy provisions, and these environmental justice provisions that we're speaking about today. We have seen today there are several people working across the state on these issues, and we are building the capacity. I very much relate to what Jeremy and Amber have said about these deadlines and building everything up. You know, our state, I don't think has had as much of a history as some of these other states with implementing this stuff. So just like the city of Des Moines, just like the state of Iowa, the Iowa Environmental Council is also working really hard and really quickly to get these programs stood up. So if you have questions about them, I'll answer them the best that we can. But, you know, we're also dependent on EPA getting back with us and other things like that. But we didn't want to miss this opportunity to share our excitement for these programs too. So quickly, what happened with the environmental justice components of the Inflation Reduction Act? It can be summed up as providing historic investments in the state's underserved or disadvantaged communities. Quickly, a definition for you. The environmental justice space is a growing movement, I would say. This definition is provided by the EPA, and I'll just kind of read over it so we're all on the same page. It's considered as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. I want to just kind of pivot here to say that this is a lens that should guide all of our work. That's how we approach it here at the Iowa Environmental Council, and I think we've seen that reflected in our programming today. We need to consider where the greatest need is, where these benefits can go, and how are we designing and implementing these programs and ultimately getting these funds to the Iowans that have been disadvantaged for a number of years, whether that includes income, pollution barriers, race, other things like that. So the IRA quickly invested a historic amount of money in environmental justice programming. The Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights was created in 2022 at the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. They oversee a portion, a sizable portion, but just a portion of the $60 billion that have funneled into this area of work, some from the IRA, some from other acts as well. And there's something that we should talk about as well, which is the Justice 40 initiative. There are $118 billion worth of federal programs that are covered under this initiative. And this is an important effort, a whole of government effort to provide the benefits of this federal spending on environmental justice to the communities that need it. So just to recap again, the Justice 40 initiative is a Biden administration goal to deliver 40% of the benefits, not the spending, but the benefits of these programs that we've talked about today, the clean energy tax credits, clean building infrastructure programs, public land management. I mean, it's every department just has a list of 1 million programs, it seems like, that are covered under this. And the idea is that the people that have been historically disadvantaged in our country through the environmental lens that we've abandoned in the past many times through, dividing communities with highways, breaking up historically Black neighborhoods, for example, that way. Communities that might surround coal plants and have dealt historically with that pollution, thinking about those communities that have been vulnerable for the vast majority of our history, getting them the benefits that they deserve and remediating some of those wrongs. This also includes a lot of focus on tribal communities for a lot of the same reasons. So I've said disadvantaged communities quite a bit. I want to stop and mention that these communities are defined under Executive Order 14008. Just to get the quick and dirty version of it, it is defining at the census tract level communities that have suffered from environmental justice burdens. That it can include many, which we'll briefly overview, but some just off the top of my head include energy burden, proximity to Superfund pollution sites, flood risk, agricultural loss due to natural disaster. There's dozens of them, but they also must meet economic indicators for disadvantaged as well. So low and moderate income communities, historic redlining, those types of things as well are very important and are required, in fact, to be considered as a disadvantaged community. IEC's approach quickly, I know that we're getting a little bit over here. We are committed to this work and we play a role. We recognize that our organization historically and currently plays a role in shaping environmental policy and regulation in this state. And we believe it's our role to help make sure that this isn't an area that fails to consider the historical impacts of the policies that we've had. Our role, we believe, is most effective when we elevate local solutions by developing relationships in communities who have faced these burdens and continue to do so. And we want to make sure that we're implementing that change with local leadership and us being a partner there. We do our best to make our work strategically driven and data driven and informed to make the best decisions that we can about how we're implementing and designing these programs. And we also recognize, as I've said before, and is required in the federal definition, Iowa's disadvantaged communities are facing both environmental justice burdens, so the flood risk, energy costs. They're also low income, moderate income sometimes, but mostly low income. And they tend to be more diverse racially in the state than the overall averages of the state population. So we're talking a lot more often about Latino populations, Black or African-American populations, and tribal nations within the state. So what we did is we took all of this and a kind of similar feeling, I'm guessing, to what Jeremy and Amber have felt over their work. We're like, what do we do with all of this money that we're saying we're going to get? How do we implement it? So we decided to do a strategy-based process. We looked at all of these indicators that we see around the state using the climate and economic justice screening tool that's available through the federal government. And we looked at, on the right side, you see these environmental justice indicators I've been talking about. These are just some of them that we use. So flood risk, expected agricultural loss rate essentially is just how much is cropland at risk to natural disaster loss. Energy burden, PM 2.5 or particulate matter pollution in the air. Where does the community stand on that? We added in the required economic indicators. The below 200% of the federal poverty line indicates what communities in the state are low to moderate income. Annual median income is also in there. And we decided that with our commitment to justice, equity, and inclusion, we should also consider demographic indicators as well. Percent Black or African American, percent Hispanic or Latino, and then American Indian or Alaska Native. So we did all that. We did a mapping exercise. Here's a quick example, which you'll be able to look at here more in just a second. This is just the energy burden on the previously defined by the federal government disadvantaged communities in the state of Iowa. You can see they're all spread out, but the energy burden is quite high. That dark purple indicates that if you even use the low range, 81st percentile nationally. So meaning that those communities are paying more than they're in the 81st percentile nationally for what they pay for their energy. So that's just one example quickly. Put these in here for you to look at later if you're curious. These slides will go out. So through this process of mapping all of this stuff and figuring out what we're going to do, we identified several communities. We have 5 target primary communities, being Sioux City, Des Moines, Ottumwa, Cedar Rapids, and Waterloo. This includes and considers all of the things that we've discussed, making sure that the Iowans who have the greatest need are getting these resources to build capacity. But it doesn't mean we're not going to serve rural areas. It doesn't mean that these secondary communities of Storm Lake, Council Bluffs, Keokuk, Dubuque, and Davenport will not get support. The things that we're working on will be a model and be useful for all of these other communities as we work to build up that capacity. So what are we doing? I've mentioned we've gotten some money. We've done the strategy work. But essentially, it boils down again to connecting federal resources through the Inflation Reduction Act and other programs through the bipartisan infrastructure law to the communities in Iowa that have the greatest need, as we've defined them and as the federal government has defined them. So the first one is what's shortly known as TICTAC, or a Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. We have a strategic partner here at the Heartland Environmental Justice Center at Wichita State University. They are the lead for our EPA region, Region 7, and they help coordinate kind of all the grant services, direct outreach, but our role is the main partner here in Iowa. So we will be investing in communities, we'll be developing relationships, we'll be shepherding these resources together to let community members know after they've approached us and built this relationship with us, us being there too, help them figure out what their funding needs are and which programs might align. So we've developed the target communities, we're establishing those resource guides. Steve's presentation was a good example of some of the resources we're pulling together for those. Ultimately, the goal is to get them funding to alleviate the challenges. And here is a quick slide on the process of what that looks like. The quickest way I can describe it is that bar at the bottom. Communities experience problems. We develop relationships in those communities with local officials, community leaders, church leaders, local labor unions, anybody who is influential in that community. Our goal is to start developing that grassroots relationship, have that expertise, connect them with the Heartland Environmental Justice Center. They will provide direct assistance with helping understand the program, guiding them on whether or not they need professional services like an engineering firm or an assessment or an energy audit to get funding for that program. And then they'll actually help them apply for the funding. And we will be a part of that process too, helping get that application in. So somewhere like a neighborhood in the city of Des Moines can apply through the state for community solar for all funding. We've helped identify the program, identify the cost area, disadvantaged community, which tax credits might apply. The Heartland Environmental Justice Center helps them get the application in. And the ultimate goal is they get the funding. And quickly, we have 2 more programs I want to mention here in the last couple minutes. The EPA's Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Grant. This is essentially focused on one major thing, building leadership and capacity for environmental justice here in Iowa. The objectives include building and training environmental justice cohorts in 4 communities, 2 communities in year 1 and 2 communities in year 2. The first year, it's pretty set for us that we will be working in Iowa City and Waterloo. We have local partners. We'll be able to give sub-awards to those partners to help conduct events, develop a leadership curriculum to help train those cohorts of local leaders so they understand what resources are available and they can inform us on what challenges that their community is facing so we can connect them with funding. And here's a list of those key partners as well. And ultimately, the goal again is to build capacity, connect them with funding. We also are a sub-awardee, the main sub-awardee on the EPA's Environmental Justice Government to Government grant. This was initially awarded overall to the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services. Again, increasing environmental justice, engagement, and capacity in the state. Some of the key elements of this program are to develop a group of environmental justice health equity program navigators. It's written right now to include up to 20. We believe that might shrink a little bit so we can give them more resources, but that's currently being negotiated with EPA. The idea is that these would be embedded local experts on community issues that also serve as liaison to those of us that understand the programs and the funding resources and be able to develop a network of folks that across the state, we can help connect them with these federal resources. And I've mentioned the two cities and the other one as well, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, and Waterloo. Along with our target communities, our local partners listed here will help us decide where some of these investments go and how we roll out this program. So this is the quickest I've ever talked about these things. I'm a little bit out of breath, and I'm sure you are too after all these. But Steve mentioned this in his presentation as well. This is a good resource for understanding these programs and getting just kind of a grasp on, what resources are out there. If you see things in your work that you're not seeing on this website or hearing from us, please reach out. That's part of our role, as I've described with TICTAC, with these other environmental justice grants. We can't decide what is important for everybody else, and that's what we want to avoid. That's why we have a strategy. That's why we conduct meetings like this. We are going to have a lot of them at the local level. We want to hear from you on that stuff. So with that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to also look at the mapping that we did. This is very much a work in process, but we launched it yesterday, so that's fun. I plan on adding all of the indicators from the climate and economic justice screening tool in there. I have been scraping access from a prior institution I attended for GIS, which is now transferred as of yesterday to IEC. So we have this control here, so we're going to continue to build upon it, but I invite you to look at your community. This is the map of the disadvantaged communities that have been defined by their indicators. So feel free to look at that. And with that, I want to say thank you.